There's nothing like being passionate about something, especially when you're passionate about something that you're very good at. You've probably heard it before where somebody gets passionate about something, they become good at a craft or they have some niche knowledge and they think, man, wouldn't it be great if I made some money from this? After all, I have a YouTube channel. This used to be a podcast. This used to be a gaming channel, believe it or not. I've been trying at YouTube for 7+ years, which doesn't sound that much until you realize that I am only 22, right? That's a big chunk of life. And I've been pushing at it, and I'm sure you have a passion of yours, or you know somebody who has a passion who's been working at it for years and years and years. Now, that's all well and good, but what happens when we pour money into those passions, right? When something like gaming was simply just a hobby and, we're good with the setup that we have, but then because I'm thinking, man, well, what if I were more competitive? What if I had a better setup so that I could be more competitive? What if I build out a setup that allows me to record this gameplay, put some clips on TikTok here and there, and you can kind of see how this snowballs into a massive expense. But that's on the monetization side. What does it look like when our hobbies just take up most of our lives and we decide to pick up a really expensive hobby like golfing? I'm just gonna leisurely golf, but then, you buy this massive golf bag at every single club known to man, right? There's nothing wrong with being passionate. In fact, if we weren't passionate about something, we'd live really, really boring lives. But we need to make sure that our hobbies stay hobbies. And if we plan on making our hobby into a job or monetizing it or maybe going competitive with it, understanding that that's no longer really a hobby. Words matter. And for me, I only recently learned this. I've struggled with my passions being hobbies, being side hustle, being job, and it was catastrophic. There are two things inside my life that I have always kind of ran after, been somewhat good at, and have got me into a bit of debt. We have a different video for that. And it is fashion and business. And those are two things that I really, really love. Video games, but that's a bit of a tangent. When I was very fashionable, and I'd say that I dress well now. You might not be able to see it because I am a minimalist now and I only wear like t-shirts. But there was a time when I bought new things here and there. I gotta get new shoes. I gotta get a new jacket. I need to be able to build out this outfit and whatever. And you can imagine how much that started to cost me. A lot of money. And it was this fashion rat race, right? Because with fashion, a lot of it is about, surprising somebody, right? They see an outfit that they haven't really seen before. It has to always have a wow factor, and it's hard to do that when you're reusing outfits, right? So you'll see a lot inside of, fashion Instagram that people are pulling out newer outfits, putting them together in different ways so that they continue to have this like wow surprise factor, and that costs money. I'm not gonna speak on the fashion Instagram scene. I'm not in it anymore. But what I will say for myself was that I was going broke trying to look more fashionable and trying to look very put together. And even though I thrifted a majority of my outfits, it still costed something, and costed something that I could not afford. I am a student, right? That's something I had to let go, but it was very hard to let go because while it was this thing that I wanted to be bigger and for it to grow, it was still just a passion, right? And this passion costed money, and I made it cost money. It's not that you have to spend money to be fashionable. I chose for it to be that way. Another good example would be this, YouTube. I've been doing this for 7 years plus, I think. And as you might have noticed, if you've watched my other videos, I used to be over there. I built out that setup. I have all the recording things I need, and I was spending money on software to make it all, work together, the camera, the audio, what have you, right? And now you might have noticed that I'm holding a different microphone. I upgraded my setup again, right? And this is another thing where passion makes you spend more money. We keep working on a passion because we're passionate about it and because we know for ourselves we're quite good at it. We keep working at it, which is like, there's nothing wrong with that. The common factor among all successful people is that they kept working at it to some extent, right? There's probably outliers all over the place, but to some extent, persistence is the common trait among successful people, right? So there's nothing necessarily wrong with being persistent, but we need to be persistent in a smart way, right? If we're passionate about something, we need to establish what it is, right? Is this just a hobby? And I'll give you an example. I just started collecting records. You can kind of see them here, right? Right, and this, oh my gosh. And these are not cheap. This one was because I bought it used and from Value Village, but I had to realize very quickly that buying records is an expenditure that is not necessarily sustainable. So it can't be a business thing. Imagine I started collecting records and I was like, man, I need to somehow monetize this, right? That would be really dumb. And I would probably be working at a net negative. Let me put that back. So very early on, I had to establish that this is purely a hobby, and I had to build a budget for it. How much am I willing to spend on hobbies? Now, this is important because if we think of it as a business, and now let's use a different example, video games. If we think of it as a business, businesses are allowed to lose money because they have some sort of projection, or they should have a projection of making money down the line, right? So when you're losing money, it's against like this profit that, you might realize, and you do need to incur expenses in order to make those profits. It's not the same for hobbies. You don't expect anything back besides pleasure and besides fun. So instead of saying, okay, how much do I need to spend to then get my money back and more, you're saying, how much do I need to spend to have an adequate amount of fun, right? Very different things. So if we go to gaming and we're saying, oh, this isn't just a hobby, this is going to be my livelihood, this is how I'm going to make money, then all of a sudden you buying 3 games that are really hot right now, getting a pro controller, having, a video setup, audio, a bunch of interfaces so that you can switch between panels, all of a sudden those aren't necessarily a hobby increasing. Like, these things are not to increase your fun and your level of pleasure while playing video games. This is to increase your profits. Again, very distinct, but they're very different. So I want you to really think about this one. You know what I mean? You watching this, or maybe myself speaking on this, we might only be willing to spend less than $100 on pleasure. You know what I mean? When's the last time you spent $100 when you went outside just to have fun, right? Probably not a whole lot of times, unless you're like a baller or something. I know I don't do that, right? But if you have worked inside a business, or you're starting your own business, or you have your own side gig, how much are you willing to spend to make $200 in profit? Now that's a good question, right? And now we have to think about it a little bit differently. It's exactly the same. But the problem is that when it comes to our hobby, we've now mixed pleasure and work together. Chances are we're willing to spend this much on pleasure and then this much on business, and all of a sudden we see ourselves splurging so much money on these things because we can now cope about it of like, oh, well, this thing is also for pleasure, so it's kind of worth it even if it doesn't make me money right now. And we're not thinking as business people the entire way. We sometimes go to the pleasure side, sometimes we go to the business side, and we jump between those depending on who's asking us what uncomfortable question. There's nothing wrong with having passions. There's nothing wrong with having side gigs. There's nothing wrong with even taking a little bit time off to, play your favorite games or take time away from work. But we just need to make sure that we are separating these things accordingly, right? And we need to make sure that there are clear lines inside of our timing of when I'm working and when I'm playing. If those are muddled together, chances are you just won't have very good efficiency when it comes to working on things. And just a bit of a side note, when we look at are your passions keeping you poor, there are two ways to look at it. There's you spending so much on your passions and in a way that is not necessary, conspicuous consumption. You consume and you expend your resources in things that just really do not matter and make you feel as if you've reached some sort of like status, right? And using your items and possessions to signal that status when really, you're broke, right? But that's one piece. But then there's the other side where people will forgo any passions of theirs, the things that make them happy in order to just work. I'm grinding. I don't have time for video games. I don't have time for anime. I don't have time for cartoons. I don't have time for going outside and chilling with my friends. I don't have time to take walks, gym, whatever have you. I'm grinding, right? Because they feel like having those passions or taking those times off or engaging in those activities will keep them poor. And I've seen this around the place where people say if you are not working 18 hours a day on your business, you're going to be broke for the rest of your life, right? And I'm broke right now, so I don't know whether this is true or not. Being devoted to just your work is not necessarily going to bring you success. It actually might take you farther from success because you don't know anything about what's going on in the world. You have no other hobbies. At some point, when you meet somebody new, and let's say it's even in a business setting, at some point they're going to not want to talk about business anymore and they'd rather talk about anything else. And if all you know is work, you are going to be the most boring person on earth. No one will want to work with you, talk with you, engage with you, whatever, right? So that's, my 2 cents on that. But going away from the having fun is keeping you poor side and coming back into the you not being able to classify what this activity is keeping you poor, I would say have a budget. And I have a bunch of videos on budgeting and credit cards and how they kept me broke for the longest time, right? Go watch those. Stop keeping up with the Joneses. There will always be somebody who has a better setup than you, better lighting, a better camera, a better microphone, and they're crushing it on YouTube, right? Or they're crushing it inside of this industry or that industry, right? If you want to make a gaming YouTube channel, there's going to be somebody who's better than you. There's going to be somebody who has better, visuals inside of their stream, whatever. If you're trying to make music, there will be people with better instruments, $1 million studio setups. You do not need to follow these people. You can have a very good show with an iPhone, right? I'd say really focus on the things that matter and make a budget for it and make like a SWOT analysis for each thing that you need and why it's a good idea, and also understand why it might be a bad idea and make sure that the good ideas outweigh the bad and actually outweigh them, right? This is like risk analysis, which, we can talk about in a different video. But when you have this better understanding of the things that we purchase, why we're purchasing them, then maybe we can start seeing that the way that I'm trying to build out this whole thing is honestly not sustainable. Or this passion of mine that I thought, man, I can start doing this and that, and I'll make this initiative and that initiative. Actually, making this a business is really expensive. I think I'll stick to my part-time job, right? That is a good way to look at it. And some people, their ego doesn't allow them to actually analyze things, right? They think I already started this process. I will be damned if I stop this process, right? I have already spent $1,000 on these golf clubs or this tennis racket. I'll be damned if I stop playing tennis, right? Which is like, sure, I mean, you already bought it. I mean, can you return it? Right? But if returning is not an option, and just admitting, like, there's nothing wrong with just admitting that, like, maybe I didn't like this thing all that much and I'm gonna let go of it. But we're so hell-bent on making sure that people see, like, guys, no, I still play golf and I'm still learning golf. I'm good at it. Guys, I still play tennis. It's embarrassing, I guess, for many people to show that something didn't work out, right? Guys, actually, I don't like tennis. And it's not even broadcasting it. Quite frankly, no one cares, right? No one's looking at your story and saying, man, he hasn't played tennis in a while. I think this guy's either ass or he stopped playing, right? If you started a YouTube channel, you started a business, so I see this so much where people run themselves to the financial ground, working on a business, losing money on a business, but they cannot fathom letting everybody know that they are not doing this business anymore, that closed, right? I used to have this fear, but I've failed so many businesses at this point. It like, you'd be surprised if I'm still working on something, right? And that's fine. That's okay. That's the way it should be, right? You fail at something and you pivot. You don't need to keep throwing money at it and hoping that, like, it blows up from there. Sometimes when you strip away the entire budget on something and you really focus on the essentials, you see that you become more creative, because now I can't just throw money at my problem. I actually need to, like, be a business person, right? I need to be creative with how I'm doing ads. I need to build a team around this. Like, I'm not good at graphic design, so instead of me bashing my head against the wall of trying to figure out graphic design, I just brought on somebody else, right? And I can focus on my passion. And here's the real kicker for this entire video, and I feel like I'm rambling. Try to operate your passions for as little money as possible. All to say, build a budget, classify things as they actually are. Is this a business? Is it not? How much am I willing to lose inside this business before I shut it down? How long do I have to actually build an audience for this business or a customer base for this business before I decide to actually switch or just shut it off completely? Having these timelines takes the stress out of, like, man, I don't know whether I'm successful or not, right? It puts a KPI on it and a timeline on it, right? And you work a little bit better at it. But you also understand that, hey, if I'm not making money from this, it's a hobby. And if it's a hobby, I don't need like 5 million softwares to run this thing. I can probably just work on like a free editor, right? Or just schedule things myself. I only recently took off all my subscriptions of like a clipping thing and a podcast software, and I'm like, bro, let me just do this straight from my camera. Anyways, rambling. You guys get the gist of it. What do you guys think? Are your passions keeping you poor? Do you think passions are keeping everybody else poor? How are you doing in a way that's, making you not poor? I don't like use the word poor so much, but what do you guys think? Let me know. And until next time, I don't have